Alright, so like most of my videos, the title is probably going to trigger a lot of you people because it is quite a harsh title. I'm saying Alan Walker is the greatest protagonist in all of shonen anime and manga, but that's what I believe. So this video is going to be subjective. If you haven't established that by now, then you probably shouldn't continue on with the video because it might hurt your feelings. In the shonen genre, there's so many incredible protagonists, and I really do think there are some that could honestly take this title from Alan, just depending on the day. But for the sake of this video, I felt like I should name it a pretty clickbaity title because not a lot of people have seen the Gray Man, unfortunately. Eren, Ippo, maybe even Luffy if you're like super into One Piece, though I kind of disagree with Luffy. In fact, I strongly disagree with Luffy being the best shonen protagonist, and I haven't seen Gintama, but I've heard some good things about Gintoki. Gintama from the surface doesn't look like my type of show, but hey, but if you think Gintoki's the best protagonist in shonen, that's cool. I did make a video on The Gray Man a long time ago titling it the greatest shonen manga ever. I do to an extent believe it is the greatest shonen manga ever. I do think I have Hajime no Ippo ahead of it, but I do still think it is pretty much up there for the competition of being the best shonen. And that video did surprisingly well because a lot of the Gray Man fanbase were kind of thirsty for videos, I suppose. So they just clicked on that video as soon as they got the opportunity. But it seems like the fanbase is bigger than I actually thought, and a lot of people actually do enjoy The Gray Man. And because I enjoyed a lot too, I kind of wanted to talk about Alan in this video. Because I think the best part of The Gray Man, aside from its incredible story and ridiculous plot twists, is the main character, Alan Walker. And because of how underrated The Gray Man is, I think Alan Walker is also one of the most underrated anime protagonists ever. So yes, he does follow the typical trope of protecting his friends, and to be honest, it's not even really a shonen type of thing because there are a lot of seinen stories where the main character is still trying to protect people. It does get kind of annoying at times, especially when he's super strong and super driven towards his goal, but that does change, and it changes pretty late in the story. But when it does change, Alan's character gets elevated very high for me. I personally love characters who have internal conflicts, and if you've been around the channel for any amount of time, you would probably know this because the characters I always mention in videos as being great characters are ones that have a lot of internal conflict. For example, Guts, Musashi, Thorfinn, Eren, Kaneki, so on. Alan does start off as a relatively simple main character, but he's also extremely mysterious, as we don't really know his backstory and we don't go very deep into where he came from and who he is. And we're shown his powers and personality, but again, we don't really get to see who this person is and why he's the main character and what's so special about him. He also does have a mysterious past, and we learn this later on in the story, and all these backstories and things that we get from Alan really add to his character in my opinion and really flesh out who he is, delivers some answers to the questions we may have had from the beginning of the story, and just make his character much more layered and make present moments much more impactful by showing us a backstory from the past. Obviously, the first 3/4 of The Gray Man's story is not nearly as good as the last quarter because things just pick up incredibly after a certain arc, and that is where I think Alan's character goes extremely high. I will say the Noah's Ark is a period in the story where Alan really starts to change, and that's because of certain events that happen, especially at the end of the arc. And I think that's where the plot and the plot twists really start to shape themselves around Alan's character, and once the things go down, it just makes for some of the greatest plot twists, reveals, and moments in the entire manga, and probably in all of shonen for me personally, because some of the twists left me speechless. And most of them had to do indirectly with Alan's character, if not directly with his character. Many things are forced onto Alan as he progresses throughout the story, and some of the things he doesn't even realize until a lot of things are revealed later on, but he is forced onto doing things he would not otherwise have had to do just because of the way things are. And I think when characters are forced into situations like this, it makes the moments much more dramatic and much more engaging to me personally. An example of this is a character like Guts, who consistently gets pushed into situations he otherwise would not have been in had it been, I guess, a quote-unquote normal life for him, but obviously that wouldn't make Guts who he is. The point is that he is being pushed into situations that he otherwise would not have been pushed into had he been just any other person. But because he was born as this person, Alan Walker, he is forced to live this kind of life. And he doesn't go through the craziest experiences. I mean, there's obviously much worse, but for the things that he goes through, it's truly sad to just see what this character has to overcome. I mean, he's such a cheerful and happy character for a lot of the story, but as the story progresses, he sort of maintains that smile. The only problem is that the smile grows faker and faker by the day, and towards where the story is currently ongoing, that smile is more so something just to cover up what he has hidden underneath. It's more so just a mask and a persona. And this is sort of displayed through his ability called Crown Clown, where he's sort of wearing a mask. If you look at the title, you can probably tell what that looks like. Without spoiling, it almost seems like Alan becomes sort of like a pawn. He is the main character of the story, but what's so interesting to me is he's not so heavily emphasized as the main character, and I love when stories do that, because even though you may love the main character, sometimes it is very important to take the spotlight off of him. All the great stories that I regard to be some of the best ever take the spotlight off the protagonist, and I think this just allows for a breath of fresh air, getting to see the perspective of other characters. Most often it is the antagonist, like for example in Monster we may have the perspective of Tenma, or we may have the perspective of Johan. In Vagabond, literally an entire arc, 40-50 chapters, is from Kojiro's whole perspective, not even Musashi, the main character. So when the Gray Man decides to put Alan off to the side and bring in other characters to really emphasize, I absolutely love it. But what is so cool is that when they bring in these new characters, they still somehow tie back to Alan, and it makes his character even more impactful and important to the story once he does return. Despite not actually being on the screen, he's still important to the storyline, and I think that's how you know you are doing things right. And ironically enough, it's almost like he's trying to get the spotlight back. It's almost like he's fighting to get that spotlight back as the main character. But you know, this being a non-spoiler video, I don't really want to get into it. If you know, you know. It's so difficult for him because the experiences he goes through are very unique, and in a way he's trying not to drag people into it whilst also maintaining his own sense of sanity. He tries so hard to focus on saving other people that he forgets about himself, and he sort of loses himself. And tying that into a real life scenario, we obviously know that that is not a good thing. The idea of being lost and having nowhere to go is also extremely prominent in the Gray Man's story for Alan, because there are many instances where he doesn't necessarily know where he's going and he doesn't know what path to take, and there are many times where he stops and just contemplates what he's doing. Similar to Guts, if he stopped, he would be taken over and he would pretty much die, but he keeps moving forward. And in the Gray Man, the phrase "don't stop, keep walking" is sort of used and represents Alan's desire to keep moving forward and not falling off the path that he's trying to pursue and not losing himself. The way he connects to the story is also another thing, as I may have mentioned briefly. The story of the Gray Man isn't what it seems to be on the surface. It's one of those stories where once you look at the synopsis, it's pretty much only scratching the surface, not even that. It is barely even explaining the story, it's just introducing the characters. Once you really get into the Gray Man and see what it's all about, get into the later arcs of the story, it is something completely different. It is unlike any of the chapters preceding it. The main conflict of the story and what initially started the Gray Man story in the first place sort of has nothing to do with Alan. It really just has to do with other characters. I'm not gonna say who, but there are two people that are extremely prominent in the story, and yet despite Alan not being this prominent in the storyline and not being super important, he's still tied in a way. He isn't just thrown to the side and cast away completely. He still has his own purpose, and he still is, in a way, our main character. His character fundamentally revolves around continuing moving forward and not losing sight of yourself despite the terrible things that may come upon you. It's obviously a subjective title. It's something I put in the title because I did truly feel that way, but at the same time, there are many great shonen protagonists out there that you can give this same title. I just think Alan is one of the best, for sure. Let me know who you think is the greatest shonen protagonist and your thoughts on Alan Walker as a character. That's it for me. Take care.